Yeah, it's been a great evening. I've got little to say, really two things. The second is to introduce Glynis Brown, who many of you will know in various ways. But Matthew wasn't joking when he said that my involvement in this event became known to me when I got my letter of invitation to come to this evening, and it had my name and address on the bottom as a reply slip. And before I could do anything about that, I'd already received 5 sets of replies with cheques and had to go to the bank-to-bank stuff, and I was well and truly nobbled. So thank you for that, Matthew. It's something I won't forget. But what it has enabled me to do is just to appreciate, really, who, in a way that perhaps nobody else can fully, just who's here tonight, and what a phenomenal event this is, really. I don't know if other old boys, old girls, alumni associations have the same sort of success as evenings as this has produced, but it is quite remarkable to have the range of people that we have here this evening. The last of the summer wines, the last of the summer wines in the top corner. Ronnie Hayward always gets a great table together, and it's great to see people there. There are even people here today who were part of the famous 1960s lacrosse team, Mike McClinton and Chris Ryans and Paul Martin, the flags winning and championship winning side. But there are also people who only left a few years ago. Ali Hardy's done a brilliant job in getting people to come here this evening, and a lovely table there. People who left in the 90s, the first girls who came to the school when I was head of 6th form and became my girls. And some of whom I had the privilege to teach economics to. Rick Booker, more recently, but more contemporary with my children, has got the table together, thanks to him for that. We have an enormous number of headmasters here this evening. Too many to mention individually, but thank you all for coming and supporting it. Tremendous numbers of staff and ex-staff, some of whom we didn't think we'd see here again, but Mossy's not done the trick with his teeth yet, but that might come later. Iain Casey's phenomenal table, it just goes on and on. There's a 1961 1C contingent. It's amazing how people still identify themselves with the first form they were in. And of course all that is related to Nick Bonnick and the fantastic job. His name was actually Nick. Well, he was known as Nick. What was his name, William? Wilfred. But he was known as Bill Bonnick by everybody. He ran the junior school, and that's a seminal part of the school. When these young whippersnappers were organising this and said that we're not going to have letters for the tables, we're going to have the names of houses, I said, but people will have to sit on a table of which they were not a house member. And there will be trouble. And there has been. But I managed to avoid the issue myself by making sure I was on the Whitworth table. We've got a message from someone in New York who said that I ought to buy Rachel Crichton a drink. She'd like to have been here, or he, something called Pills. The text that's come in to David Marsden. Does David Marsden texts and emails? But that's another thing. Saturday Debt. Where did that come from? How many people have been in Saturday detention? Yeah. And memories of not being able to look members of staff in the face when you come back. That was nice. Mine was, sadly, was Dr. Parry, who I never could actually look in the eye after as a teacher. But my main function this evening is just to thank you all for coming. And if I've not thanked anybody, sort of your group individually, I'm really sorry to have missed you out. And to welcome as our final speaker, a former colleague of mine who came as a maths teacher longer ago than we care to remember, to William Humes, and who progressed in stellar fashion to become Vice Principal at William Hulmes, to take them through the move into academy status, and is now called upon to use that expertise to help in other situations as a consultant nationally. I'm very privileged, really, to have a good friend, former Wally Range High School girl herself. So no stranger to William Hulmes and William Hulmes people. Glynis, thank you very much.
Earlier. Whilst what have I done? Well, quite frankly, I've stayed in the same place for 28 years, doing a job I absolutely loved, and every time I got a little bit bored, they promoted me, so what more could I want than that? I came to the school in 1984, and my employment history had gone like this. I went to London University and gained a degree in mathematics, stayed there and got a postgraduate degree in order to teach, taught for an extremely long period of 3 years, and then stopped to have a family. In those days, of course, you couldn't take maternity leave, you had to resign and leave. So I stayed at home for 9 years, bringing up 3 children, and then I thought it might be time to come back to work. And I let my friends know that I was thinking about this in a half-hearted way. On one Wednesday in January, a friend rang up and said that a job was advertised at William Hulme, it was part-time and it was for a mathematician. So, on the Wednesday, which the day it was advertised, I bought a newspaper, looked at it. On the Thursday, I rang the school. On the Friday, I visited the school and had some sort of interviews with the then head, Mr. Gilliel, and with Boris and with Malcolm Booker, the head of mathematics. And on the Monday, I started. It was as simple as that. I did not fill in an application form. I did not actually have any references checked. And CRB checks just didn't happen in those days. So nothing like that happened at all. I didn't intend to stay very long at school, to be honest. It was like, you know, a bit of a taster job. And some of you who I taught probably knew that. A bit of a taster job to get back into it. And I have a very clear memory of standing in assembly in those first few weeks and being part-time and the lowest of the low. I was standing in the back row of assembly. And I was a bit bored, so I was reading the notices, the boards that are on the side of the, the hall there. And one of them lists the names of staff who have stayed for more than 20 years. And I was young and I was arrogant, and I read that board, and I thought, 20 years in one place, how sad is that? Well, of course, I did stay, and I've seen an incredible amount of change throughout those years, and I've actually been involved in actually doing quite a lot of it. But the thing that I really want to bring out in my speech tonight is that the school, the things that matter in a school, have always stayed the same. It's always given an all-round academic education. It's always offered lots of extracurricular activities for people to develop interests. It's always given lots of opportunity for responsibility, and hence it's always turned out very employable young men and women. And that is the same today as it was when you were in your school. The world in 1984 was a very different place, and William Hulmes actually reflected this. When I arrived, it seemed to me to be a very austere male environment. I realise that may not be popular, but that's what it was to me. The prefects and the staff wore gowns. I never was sure why. I think it was probably either to keep them warm because the science block was so appallingly cold, or it was to keep their clothes clean because we were using dreadful chalk all the time. Boys were referred to always with their second names. They didn't appear to have a first name. And the common room was like a gentleman's club. Basically, it was a flood of smoke. There was, people had their own chair, and won't be tied anybody who sat in it. There was a lady to serve tea and coffee at break time and after school. And as I say, it was quite a comfortable environment. Now, there were only 5 women on the staff. And really, I think the boys didn't know quite what to do with us, but I'm quite convinced their aim was to try to reduce us to tears. Some of the little jokes were fine, they were trivial, they were funny, but the one that I remember the most didn't happen to me, it happened to a geography teacher. But she came out of the school one evening, went to her car that was parked by the dollar block, got in it, started the engine, put it in gear, but the car didn't move. The reason why it didn't move was that some boys had jacked it up just sufficiently so that the wheels did not touch the ground. And I've always wanted to know who did that. So if any of you... That's great. Can we have a chat later? Right. Fortunately, the men were very, very supportive of us. Sometimes perhaps overly supportive, actually, but they were very, very supportive. Most of that, again, was in the ways you would expect. But I have a vivid memory of walking across the quad one day and meeting a very large member of staff. Some of you will be able to identify him. He taught games and ran the CCF. He positively towered over me. Absolutely, Mr. Chudley, it was. And anyway, are you ready? Thank you. Anyway, he stopped me in the quad and he said, Glynis, I believe that some of 3B, maybe some of whom are here tonight, but some of 3B are giving you a difficult time. He knew that was happening because his son was in that class. So he said, don't worry about this, Glynis. He said, you just give me a list of the little buggers, and I will make every single one of them suffer on the rugby pitch. So support can take many forms. Discipline also took many forms. There was, as was referred to earlier, detention. One could give lines, things like that. But one member of staff had a much more original way of controlling his class. And it's a few years into my career, but I was actually showing some parents around the school. And I walked into his classroom to find, by the door, there was a bin, and in the bin was a boy standing on one leg. I immediately improvised and said to the parents that this was clearly a lesson about balance. But I then very, very quickly ushered the parents out of the door before anybody could correct me, because I knew the real answer was that boy was in the bin, because we all know that rubbish belongs in a bin. Anyway, as I say, I came to the school, and very shortly afterwards, the governors made the decision that we would go co-ed. And I was in fact appointed by Mr. Briggs to become girls' tutor, to sort of ease the way for those girls, to look after those girls a bit. And in fact, my first job was to get old girls joined the sixth form, and then the younger ones came the year after. Suddenly, the school became a different place. People had first names as well as second names, such as music and drama was greatly enhanced. And it became very apparent in such as the house plays, when for one thing, it was no longer necessary to pad boys to make them look like girls. But also, I remember the curtain opening at the second half, and there was an audible gasp from the audience as they saw a real girl sitting on a bed in a negligee in a fairly provocative way. Can you remember it, Iain? I can see you're nodding. Yes? It says something about that era, though, that the HMC, i.e. the Headmasters' Conference, actively encouraged me and my colleagues in other schools, my equivalent colleagues in the other local independent schools, we were encouraged to set up an annual Women into Management Conference. These happened for 6 years, and I'm pleased to say that quite a few of the young women who attended went into posts of responsibility. But could you imagine today setting up a conference that's only, it's actually advertised that it's only open to women or open to men? It just could not happen. The times were very different then. Change to co-education was the first of many changes that I know some of you have found exciting because perhaps you benefited from them, but some of you have found almost intolerable because your school has been changed. No school can ever stand still, or no institution at all, if it is going to